Welcome back. In the previous segment, we were discussing what crime is, what actions should be considered a crime, if there were any principles that we could use to differentiate actions that should be considered a crime from those that should not. I said that we were going to consider the fundamental cause of crime, and that's the first question I'd like to ask Congressman Engel.
Well, causes of crime, I think, vary. There are a lot of people who believe that if you can eliminate poverty, if you can lessen poverty, if you can improve conditions socially, that crime will drop accordingly. So I would argue that, for instance, in the crime bill that I mentioned, we had monies in there for prevention, for youth activities, for schooling, after-school programs, and things like that. I think that that goes a long way in eradicating or helping to eradicate root causes of crime. However, I don't want to imply that poverty in itself is an excuse for someone committing a crime.
Okay, so it's your view that poverty causes crime? That's the fundamental cause of crime?
No, I'm saying that I think poverty in many instances can contribute to crime. If somebody has grown up in a situation of poverty and it's a hopeless situation, that some individuals, given those circumstances, will turn to crime. I don't think it's an excuse, frankly, because there are many individuals who are poor who don't commit crimes.
Right, and there are many that are rich that do. Right?
Well, I think there are many that are rich who do.
So then it's not possible to establish a correlation between poverty and crime?
No, I think that clearly if conditions are bad or poor for somebody, then chances are that there is a higher possibility that some of those people might be involved in crime. That's why you have so much crime in so many of the poorer neighborhoods.
Well, was the United States poorer 50 years ago than today?
I don't know.
Oh, 100 years ago? The standard of living was lower, people were poor. Were they not?
I think the standard of living was lower years ago.
Right, so was there more crime 100 years ago or 50 years ago?
Well, maybe it gets back to my point about drugs, when I said that I think that crime has increased because of the proliferation of drugs in this country. I think there's a direct correlation with the drug problem in this country and with violent crime.
Okay, so
I
even
think
though
50 years ago, we didn't have a drug problem in this country.
I agree.
And so I think to a large degree we had less crime.
So, but the point is that even though 50 years ago we were poor, there was less crime, so it's not possible to establish a correlation between poverty and crime and claim that poverty is causing crime, because when we were poor, we didn't have more crime. Well, and there's many countries, say like Costa Rica, for example, much poorer than the United States, have lower crime rates.
That's
right?
True.
So, so that's not the fundamental cause of crime.
There are also less guns in that country. We have a proliferation of guns in this country, which leads to crime, I believe leads to crime. That's why we need gun control.
Well, are there more guns per inhabitant in Switzerland than in the United States, and they have lower crime rates?
No, I think what I'm saying is there are many guns in this country. We have a larger amount of guns in this country per capita than any other country in the world. And I believe
in Switzerland they have as many.
Well, I'm not aware of that. I think that
and they have much lower crime rates.
I think that this country has a proliferation of guns, and guns are one factor that contributes to crime. You know, you can't talk about crime in terms of simplicity. This is what I said when I started. It's a complex problem, and there are complex solutions if there are any solutions. It's not an easy problem, and there are no easy solutions. The reasons we have crime in this country are many, and there are a lot of things that converge to make crime a big problem in this country. It isn't only because there are guns. It isn't only because there are drugs. It isn't only because there's poverty. But there are reasons, parts of each of those three, and probably 30 others, that converge, and that's why we have crime in this country. We have violence glorified on the television set. We have violence glorified in the movie theaters.
Well, let me ask you a question. Can you reduce crime effectively if you do not know the fundamental cause?
I think different people would disagree on the fundamental causes of crime.
Isn't it necessary to know the cause in order to achieve an effect? Say, if you want to lose weight, don't you need to know that you have to expend more calories than you consume in order to lose weight?
Yeah, but I don't think losing weight and crime are analogous.
But if you want to achieve an effect, don't you need to know the cause so you can achieve it?
No, I think that is, what maybe someone would teach in a college course, but in the real world, I don't think it works that way.
You don't think knowledge is effective in achieving your goals?
No, I didn't say that.
Well, knowledge of relationships of cause and effect, that's what we're talking about. Knowledge in the sense of knowing what the relationship of cause and effect is. What is it? What is the fundamental cause of crime?
I think there are different interpretations, and I think that people have different ideas about what's important in combating crime. Okay?
I agree, but what we're trying to do is sort out which ideas are true and which are not. That's why I'm examining the reasoning behind these various ideas.
I think that my beliefs are true, and somebody else will think that their beliefs are true, and in reality, there's probably nothing that's true. It's just different philosophies and different ideas in terms of how do we get at crime.
There isn't anything that's true as to what is causing crime? There is no truth?
Well, I've given you things that I think are true, and you have told me that, well, didn't we have poverty 50 years ago?
Right.
And so poverty, in your opinion, cannot be one of the causes of crime.
I didn't persuade you that poverty cannot be the cause of crime if we have situations or countries that are very poor that have low crime rates?
Let me start again, because maybe I'm not getting through. I said that there were a number of things that converge to create crime or
Let's
to
examine
cause
them
crime
one at a time.
That I believe converge to have crime in this country. You may have poverty levels in other countries that are worse than this country, but you may not have guns, or you may have punitive laws like in Singapore, okay, where people will not commit crimes because the laws are very, very tough. There are different societies. There are different beliefs in different societies. There are different values
Isn't that
and
a fundamental there?
In different societies.
Aren't a person's conclusions about how he should deal with other people the fundamental difference between a criminal and a person who isn't?
I think that, you see, what you're trying to do is you're trying to say that there are set patterns, that everything neatly falls into a box. And I'm trying to explain that I think that different people have different philosophies about why crime is caused and how to eradicate it. And my beliefs may be different from your beliefs. Okay, I believe, for instance, the government ought to do prevention programs, whereas other people will ridicule midnight basketball and say that if you're paying kids to play basketball, or you have these programs to play basketball at night, that is not a way to prevent crime. The way to prevent crime is to take that money and build more prisons. Okay, I would say that the way to deal with it is to have a mix of prevention. So you have these youth programs to keep kids off the streets and give them something to do. You use the money to create jobs or create schools, learning, so these kids can get skills so they can be productive citizens. If they're productive citizens and they have an income, that will certainly keep them away from crime. I think that's an important cause. Some of my colleagues think that shouldn't be done at all.
If
you just
can I ask you a question?
Toughen the laws, you build the prisons, you make things tough. That's their philosophy. That's not my philosophy.
I agree that different people have different ideas, but what we're trying to do is sort out which are true. And we're trying to examine whether there's a correlation of cause and effect between poverty and crime, and that's what we discussed first, or between having guns and crime. That was the second. Are there any other things that you think are the cause of crime, to see if we can actually establish a relationship of cause and effect? I suggested that it is mistaken conclusions about life, a person's values, that is the root cause. In other words, if a person is committed to reasoning, producing, and trading as a way of achieving his ends, he won't try to rob or con people. But if he thinks that that is an effective way to achieve his ends, then he will. So I would say, really, that it is a person's fundamental conclusions that is the root cause. And it explains, for example, the other collateral cause that you mentioned, which was drugs, because if you have bad conclusions about how to live, you think that you can achieve your life by having drugs, and that's just a mistake. So really, drug taking is just an effect from bad conclusions about life. In other words, mistaken values.